Welcome back to 3 Up, 3 Down in our AL East divisional breakdown. Moving on to the Toronto Blue Jays, the boys up north. What do you got on the latest with the Toronto Blue Jays and what they did this offseason as we jump in on this team?
Yeah, so a team that has been in contention for a couple years now. Obviously got a great young core, but they went ahead and made some big offseason moves.
Yep.
Headlined by a big trade sending Lourdes Gurriel and Gabriel Moreno, who is one of the top catching prospects, to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and in return they get Dalton Varsho, who, interestingly enough, also a catcher, but played a lot of center field for the Diamondbacks last year. He looks like he's going to be playing left field with Kevin Kiermaier in center, another offseason addition, and then George Springer in right. So you kind of have three center fielders in that outfield. I like the look of how they will play defensively. Another big addition to the lineup, they add Brandon Belt, who looks like he'll be the starting DH for now, at least probably against righties. A good player, he's on the later end of his career, but a left-handed bat. So I like how the three additions to the lineup, all left-handed bats. They keep Whit Merrifield, who I think is a really good player when he's playing well and didn't have what the season they were hoping he would last year.
It's tough to adjust. You're coming from Kansas City, a guy that we're not getting into the vaccine and vaccinations, but had to be vaccinated to travel over the border, and kind of was thrown into the mix right away with a competitive team that was racing and trying to catch the Yankees. But no, I think you've got a good point on that. You look at the roster, you've got four guys that are under the age of 35, being Chapman, but he turns 30 here shortly. Throws Calvin Biggio to the bench indefinitely. But this is a young, very powerful, very talented lineup. They added Springer a few off seasons ago. It fits right in. I mean, you got to go Springer, Bichette, Ferrero to start. That's terrifying. And knowing what Kirk put up last year, do I expect a little bit of regression? I do, at least in the power numbers. But the fact is, they're still going to be able to drive in runs, and they're still going to wreak havoc at the top of that lineup. And then you've got the experience at the end with Brendan Belt, Whit Merrifield, and Kevin Kiermaier potentially rocking the 7, 8, 9 hole. And Matt Chapman slides in at the 6th. It is depth throughout the whole 9. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. What do you got on the rotation for this Blue Jays team?
Yeah, so the rotation is a huge question mark in my mind. They've added a lot to it. You start with Alek Manoah, who I think at this point has established himself as one of, maybe not the elite tier aces, but he's looking to break into that category. And I think the whole league is watching for him to take that next jump. He's already an all-star, and I bet he'll be an all-star again this year. He's that type of pitcher. But I think people are looking for him to be like a Garrett Cole type. And he definitely has those capabilities. It's a different thing having the capabilities and actually doing it. So we'll see what he does. Kevin Gausman had a fantastic year for Toronto last year, just not walking batters, not giving up easy things. But then you have Jose Berrios and Yusei Kikuchi, two big additions.
Berrios, who was there last year.
But two big additions from 2 off seasons ago, or last off season. And they had underwhelming years, just like outright just bad years. Jose Berrios was one of the worst pitchers that in baseball, really. He was horrible.
Yep.
And he was brought in to be that kind of third ace. He was brought in to be a really good starter. They paid a lot to get him, and he was bad. He was just bad. He needs to have a rebound. Yusei Kikuchi needs to have a rebound. They bring in Chris Bassett, who's coming off a couple good years now.
Yep.
I think he's going to be solid, but you want him as your fourth if you're going to contend. The rotation is oozing with potential. Berrios needs to have a good season. He just does. I mean, like it's a bad sign because they're going to keep pitching him because of how much they're paying him. They traded a lot to get him. Then they signed him a big contract. I don't know what's going to happen there. But the rotation should be good. But we need to see it. We just need to see it.
No, you're not wrong about that. I think Blue Jays fans could be excited about the fact that you're finally seeing Alek Manoah take the steps that he needed to, and he has finally solidified himself as a major league ace, making an all-star team last year and being in that kind of Cy Young conversation. I expect him to be in that again. In terms of who we see as X factors, why don't you lead us off? Who's your X factor for this Blue Jays team?
Yeah, so I just mentioned him, and there's honestly 2 ways I want to go with this. But I think the guy who has to be the X factor here is Jose Berrios. And we just talked about it, and I'm kind of going to be repetitive, but for the Blue Jays to make a run at a World Series, which is what they're looking for, he needs to be a good starter. And if he's going to put up a over 4 ERA, that's just not enough. It's just not enough for what they're paying him. And He's sliding in as the number 3 starter. Let's see it. I don't want to see Bassett starting Game 3. I think if Bassett starts Game 3 for the Blue Jays, it's problematic. And maybe Bassett and Yusei Kikuchi have great years, but I think Berrios is just kind of this key guy who's going to need to go do something. I wouldn't put it past him. He's got great stuff, but he's my X factor.
I get it. I completely understand. I think that is completely reasonable. I think definitely needs to bounce back. You saw this team, we didn't cover the bullpen very much. It has a decent bullpen. But my X factor for this team, and it's tough to ask because I'm going to ask more out of him. I'm going to ask him to be the AL MVP, and that's going to be Vladdy Guerrero Jr. I'm going to ask him to stay on the field healthy for a complete season, maybe not a whole 162, but the fact is he needs to be healthy, he needs to lead this team, and he needs to take the steps to be the AL MVP, and I see that potentially happening for this team.
Yeah, I like that pick. I mean, he has that potential, and I think last year was a great season for him, but it was underwhelming because of the expectations for Vladdy and what caliber player he was. If he makes that jump to be a 50-homer guy, which I think everyone knows he has, it's a different thing saying and having the potential and doing it. It's going to be a common theme around these previews. But he's truly one of the guys, if you're going to pick a new 50-home run hitter, he's one of the first guys you're going to name. If he does that, this lineup looks completely... I mean, any lineup with a 50-homer guy looks completely different. He's going to be exciting to watch. We're getting into his, true prime years. He's 24 entering this year, which is absurd.
Terrifying.
He's got 10 more years of elite power hitting at least. I really like the pick. I think if he has a huge year, the Blue Jays could be a favorite going into the playoffs.
And I almost went George Springer. I think he's another guy that you got to ask, stay on the field, stay healthy, kind of resemblance of what he was doing for that Houston organization, even though they were cheating. I think it will be an interesting year for this Blue Jays. Obviously, I picked the Yankees to finish first in this division. I think this team finishes close behind them in a tight fight for the whole season, going all the way to September. But I see this team finishing second in the division.
Okay, I like the pick, and I'm just going to quickly mention the bullpen here because it's going to impact my pick, and they're kind of a combined X factor because Jordan Romano had a great year last year.
And if he can close like he did this last season, it's elite.
But the rest of the bullpen's bad. It's just not good. They don't have the stuff other bullpens have. They don't have the pedigree. They don't really have anything going. Look for them to probably acquire like every contending team will do at the deadline. But I think there needs to be some breakouts in the bullpen, and I'm expecting that. Not really sure why. They don't have a great track record of developing random bullpen arms like some teams do. But I'm going to say this is the year that they're going to get some arms in the bullpen from out of nowhere because that's how it happens. Somebody's going to break through. And I'm going to pick them to win the division here. And it's going to be an offensive team. The pitching, again, this is relying on Berrios, relying on Kikuchi, Bassett. This rotation needs to carry because, they need to carry somewhat. They need to carry their load because the lineup should carry the offensive load, and the bullpen's got to be good enough, and I'm banking on that.
Well, and a guy, Jose came from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And a guy who was clearly their ace for a long time in Minnesota. The pressure shouldn't be there for a guy that's slated as the third starter behind Guzman and Manoah. I don't know. I agree with you. I think this is a team that, as we look at the rule changes as we covered in last week's episode, this bullpen is going to struggle a lot with the quick pitching, the potential for becoming more exhausted as you're throwing at a more rapid pace. But we'll see what happens with the Toronto Blue Jays. That wraps up our Blue Jays breakdown. Comment, subscribe, check out the channel, and feel free to interact with us.
Yeah, and a common theme here, boys and girls, we don't know everything about your team. So if you guys got somebody you're watching
and we missed something
that's going on, please comment because that'll be something we're going to talk about in the podcast. In the full form podcast, we're going to go over some of these spring training breakouts, and we just can't follow every spring training player, unfortunately.
It's tough. And the World Baseball Classic started. It's tough.
It's huge when you comment, though, and we really appreciate it because we get to know your team a little bit better.
Without a doubt. And moving on to our next team, the Tampa Bay Rays.